Dickens.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Bill, for all of your work in pulling this together, and all of the organizations, Enterprise, House ATL, et cetera, all of you for the Transformation Alliance for bringing us all together. My name is Andre Dickens, and I want to be the next mayor of the city of Atlanta. I think this election is about the future and the soul of the city of Atlanta. Who are we? Are we going to move forward in peace, productivity, and prosperity, or are we going to go backwards into displacement, destruction, and corruption? Are we going to move this city forward to overcome the tale of two cities that we know about? A city that has a tremendous amount of prosperity, but also multi-generations of poverty. I want to make sure that we bridge that gap, as I've done in my adult life when it comes to formulating strategies and projects and programs and policies for equity. And this is a very important time as we talk about affordable housing and housing in the city of Atlanta right now. I've been a vocal and legislative leader on city council as it relates to affordable housing for all of my 8 years. I've been the most vocal in City Hall about affordable housing. I have strategies and plans and demonstrated capacity to lead in this area. I've demonstrated it through my accomplishments and all of the policies that I produce and the programs. I'm anxious to move forward in a new direction that is so focused on equity and opportunities for all of Atlantans to be able to live in the city of Atlanta that they have long desired to live in, but now are being displaced. And so I want to make sure that we have a pathway for seniors to continue to live in the city of Atlanta, for those that are having new amenities come around them to be able to stay in Atlanta. So as you know, from inclusionary zoning to senior rehab housing developments to fighting development authorities that did not put affordable housing in their incentive packages. I've done all that and created more. I'm Andre Dickens.
Thank you, Councilman.
Good morning. Again, thank you to our sponsors for bringing this very important subject before us. You know, housing is one of the 5 essentials for survival. And you also mentioned security, which is one of those as well. And they are interdependent upon each other and go hand in hand. In Atlanta, we have a desperate need for housing on all spectrums, starting with our unsheltered population, also talking about those who are income challenged, as well as our workforce. Our City of Atlanta employees, for example, can't afford to live in the City of Atlanta. And then even those who have jobs that are middle to lower middle income are challenged by the market and what is going on. As a member of council, I have been one who has championed affordable housing, making sure that those developments that took place in my district had a component of affordable housing. Making sure, for instance, when the Atlanta Housing Authority revitalized Perry Homes into West Highlands community, that we had affordable housing on a spectrum, single-family homes, apartments for rent, making sure that we had a component where we could house our elderly, they could live in comfortable surroundings. And I've also made sure that, for instance, when we're discussing the Beltline, that we made an amendment to make sure that we had an affordable housing trust fund. I'm also have sponsored legislation to make sure that we are making sure that we are looking at all of our needs. There is a spectrum of needs in the city of Atlanta, and housing is at the forefront. Housing is a right, and we need to have safe, clean, affordable housing for all residents on all spectrums.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Question 1, investments in the city's infrastructure has historically contributed to wide gaps in opportunity, wealth, and health, leading to displacement of legacy residents. The question, outline your plan to prevent displacement of legacy residents and their families while ensuring investments in the communities benefit them as well as new residents.
So yes, there are many things that I would like to see us do on anti-displacement. First and foremost, we need to do a city-wide study that will consider what the neighborhood standards are so we can rank them from A to F. There are many of our areas that are still affordable, and we need to know what infrastructure, what other needs they have to help stabilize those communities. Also helping the residents there, particularly the seniors and others, make sure that they can rehab their home and keep them in place. We also need to look at the property taxes, either finding a legacy resident assessed value cap or an increased exemption for those who have lived in their homes 10, 15 years or more. That also would have to work along with, of course, our school board as well as our county for them to really see that impact. We also need to make sure we're educating our citizens about predatory speculators in our community so that they're not selling their properties for pennies on the dollar and not following to a lot of this unscrupulous investing that's going on. I know I get calls every single day almost about properties, my home, wanting to buy it. And I know that a lot of people are receiving that information as well. And we need to have someone at City Hall who can assist them and direct them as needed to make sure that they're making the right choices with their property. So I want to make sure that we also look at the anti-displacement fund that is already in place in the city and see how we can make that citywide where others can help invest in helping people who are finding themselves on the edge if they have to lose their property. We want our legacy residents to stay because they are the lifeblood of our city.
Yeah, part of the answer to your question is the new thing is doing the old thing fully. Just do what we said we would do. This is a drumbeat that I've had for 8 years. And so the result of that is all of the fantastic recommendations that House ATL came up with, the new thing is just fully do the old thing. There are a whole list of great ideas and functional, doable items as it relates to development without displacement, to keep people in place, to allow folks to be able to have an opportunity to continue to live in Atlanta. For us, it's about the will. What is your focal point? We put a lot of things in place because I kept beating a drum since 2013 that working folks can't afford to live in the city of Atlanta. Housing costs have increased by 50%, but their incomes have only increased by 10%. So that means that at some point, lots of people begin to be cost burdened. We have all of the recommendations from stopping predatory lending by, stop predatory advancement against seniors, to be able to freeze seniors' taxes, to have long-term affordability, to have an anti-displacement fund, which we have, that we have to fund more, to be able to use reserves to improve that anti-displacement fund. We have to hire a chief housing officer that is committed to anti-displacement while also knowing how to build. We have to build at Bankhead, Bowen Homes, all these AHA properties that have not been built on for 12 years. This is where we get our density. This is where we have our mixed income from 0% AMI all the way up to market rate. I want to see that happen in rapid form and fashion, and we have to follow the recommendations of all the great minds that have put in and using our nonprofit developers to help us.
Thank you. And who does that person report to in your administration?
Me,
Okay.
the mayor.
Our next question. How do you deal with the housing needs of the most vulnerable? You might see a theme in our questions here. How do you deal with the housing needs of the most vulnerable? The low income, the unhoused, and those facing evictions. Moore, you're up.
Housing is a right, and it is certainly something everyone needs. And our unsheltered population is one that has to be a part of the conversation. And we have to have this conversation with people in the community because we have to not only say we want to house people, but we have to be willing to allow them to be housed in our community. And so it is a regional approach that we're going to have to take. It's going to have to take multi-jurisdictional involvement from not only the city, because the city cannot do it alone. It's going to take the county with Health and Human Services. It's going to take the state chipping in with mental health services. It's going to take our federal government And we're going to have to bring all of those resources together and work with our partners to make sure that we provide housing not only for those that are unsheltered, but for those that are lower income. We have let them down because we have property in the Atlanta Housing Authority that we have not developed. And that is where we can allow them to be housed, as well as looking at the fact that they have vouchers, but they cannot go anywhere with them if private homeowners don't allow them to. And so we need to make sure that we're providing those opportunities on the ground, even working with more private sector apartment complexes to make sure that they will allow those who are on the lower income strata have an opportunity to have somewhere to live. But to deal with this issue, we all are going to have to be a part of this and not just pointing out the problem. And that will take, again, a multi-jurisdictional approach, very different levels of our government approach, but also, more importantly, our community. We have to say that we will allow a supportive housing, smaller shelter beds in our community.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Councilman Dickens.
Yeah, we currently have a moral dilemma on our hands where a little over 3,000 individuals are unsheltered in our city. And about a quarter of them actually live on the streets. This is something we have to resolve, and my 8 years on city council, we've seen that go down by 25 to 50%, depending on who's counting. But as of late, over the past year and a half, we've seen that number of unsheltered rise, and individuals that don't go into a shelter or transitional housing at all. And so they are living on the streets of Atlanta. And I believe that we should have a housing first model, as has been established in this city. Working with Partners for Home in our continuum of care, it is important that we get people into a stable place of housing for at least 90 days. We can then triage them. We can triage for mental health issues, for drug addiction, for domestic violence, for whatever has led them into poverty, into homelessness for this temporary period or this extended period. We can then triage them where they are in a stable environment and getting a comfortable place to stay and a meal. This is important, where we can bring in the mercy cares and we can bring in the institutions that can help us be able to triage the situation. But first, we have to start with housing first. And I believe that we can have a dozen hotels, motels in the city or just outside of the city where we can do that. We can buy those facilities and enable those people to go there for that temporary period of time and have social workers be able to triage the situation. We passed the $25 million homeless opportunity bond. That is still available to us, and we used it greatly during COVID. We have to utilize the land that's at the Atlanta Housing Authority. As I said, I believe that our new development that we actually will do when I'm mayor at Atlanta Housing Authority, we actually start building housing units, and they will start with the homeless population first. We will start with 0% AMI as our starting point, and then we move people to jobs through Georgia Works.
Thank you. So historically low supply of all housing stock. This past year, we've seen a sharp rise in home prices that we all acknowledge. You've all spoke to production, but I want to put a little sharper point on it. There's a 30% home ownership gap between black and white families, which is a leading contributor to the wealth gap. If you don't own a home, it's hard to build wealth. What would you do to increase affordable housing production and promote home ownership in black households to help close the gap? Councilman Dickens.
Yes, in 8 years, we will build or preserve 20,000 units of affordable housing in my administration. And that includes housing that is, whether that's rental housing or for sale housing. As you mentioned, home ownership is going to be very important. From down payment assistance, which we have put in $140 million worth of housing opportunity bonds that I've been a part of as a co-sponsor, 100 one time and $40 million another time. And each time we do put in their money for down payment assistance. We have to be more aggressive with that, and also with Invest Atlanta. I think, as others have said, it is very important that at the Atlanta Housing Authority property and at MARTA that we actually build. We have not built in 12 years, and it's important that we build housing that is for rent and for sale and for seniors. This is a critical amount of land that we can leverage to be able to have families, because the land cost is already there. It's already free. It's baked in. We can be able to provide low-income housing right there on those sites and go in density. Lots of opportunities there. We have not talked a lot about community land trusts, but the community land trusts are vital. We have to do a lot more community land trust properties. Amanda Ryan has said something like 500 can be done with a small investment, and that's what I'll contribute to, as well as the home bank. Now, we've talked about housing, and of course, we need to do the missing middle, where we have duplexes, triplexes, where individuals can own one side of the whole thing and then rent out to others and make income. But we also have to talk about income, because jobs is important for us to be able to have home ownership. That's why programs like my Tech Bridge program that trains people to go from poverty to prosperity, to get a $60,000, $70,000 job in just 4 months. I've trained hundreds of people that are now home owners when they were renters. It is important to have an Atlanta Department of Labor that also works with our housing department, so that then we overcome these challenges.
Thank you for that question, because the home ownership gap in the Black community is a real situation. So how do we fix that gap? You first have to look at some of the impediments. Of course, first and foremost, what do you make? How much money do you make, and are you able to get good paying jobs? And so I certainly have a lot of plans of working, get our Atlanta Workforce Development Agency up and running, working with the unions who have excellent apprentice programs where people can get good paying jobs. But when you get the job, how can you handle the money? And so a lot of us in the Black community have issues with credit worthiness. We need to do financial literacy, helping people get their credit together, and working with organizations like NACA, who do an excellent job of helping walk people through the process so that they can get into the home ownership. The second part of your question was about production. How do we produce these units? And we talked about the many opportunities we have from city-owned property to AHA, but we also have a lot of property in our land bank authority. And instead of giving those properties to for-profit organizations, we can work with our nonprofit sector. I would like to see us be able to have a direct link to those properties to home ownership, and then maybe working with a NACA or another organization that can help get them the finances that they would need to either rehab the property or to build on vacant property. So we need to look at not only the fact that people have a hard time getting into properties because of their credit worthiness, getting them able to do that, making sure they have a job that can pay for it, and looking at the property that we have now in the city and making it available to them.
Thank you very much. Our next question really gets to some real sensibilities, and where if you're sitting at the council or you're the mayor, you get a blunt of a lot of different opinions about this. But where I'm going here is around zoning. So the city of Atlanta is growing and attracting good jobs, and many of you spoke to, if you're not making a living wage, you're not likely to be able to afford your housing. However, our housing supply and production lags considerably. Zoning can determine how we develop our community and ultimately who can live where. The question: how do you propose adopting the city's zoning regulations to accommodate these new residents while not fueling further displacement? Councilman Dickens.
Yeah, we definitely have to get more density. We have to increase density in the city of Atlanta, and that's because the land costs continue to rise, and we have so many people that find our city attractive that continue to move here. So we do have to grow in density. Also, it increases our revenue capacity for the city to be able to pay for all the services and the things that we want to do on behalf of the public. I was the first council member and anyone in the Southeast to pass an inclusionary zoning policy in the whole Southeast. This is a challenging thing to do. It took 2 years to get done, and it is the Beltline inclusionary zoning as well as West Side, the stadium neighborhoods. This is where we incentivize developers and require them to give us affordable housing units in exchange for additional density. So that is what I've already done, which is why I believe that we can do more of that as we grow across the entire city. We have to invest in allowing for the missing middle, duplexes, triplexes, quads. Those are things, flats and bungalows inside of the city already that are in the city, but adding to that so that people can live, have more folks on an acre of land. And I think that's important, but we have to make sure that we do this in a way that preserves the quality and the character of our communities. What I'd like to see is on all of our AHA properties that we have more density. Around our transit corridors, MARTA stations have to have a whole lot of density. We should be going sky high as much as we can, using nonprofit developers and for-profit developers. Also, on some of our corridors, some of our high-capacity corridors, these roads should have more density. But I also believe that the communities, the single-family residences, these neighborhoods should have the ability to preserve their character by not having us blanket and tell them exactly what to do in our zoning department. So that's why we're doing a zoning rewrite that I recommend.
Thank you, Member Dickens.
Yes, thank you for this question because it certainly is an issue that's before the city. As early as March, I was asked about this at an MP meeting, and it was printed in the newspaper that I do not support a proposal to disrupt the character of our single-family neighborhood. Then later on, we had proposals that are before the council now for CDP and zoning changes, in which I asked the authors to make sure that they were getting community input. After that, I have since, every time someone, and we have gotten thousands of comments in our office related to this, made it very clear that I oppose the current draft of the CDP and the zoning changes that are before council. We have to be very careful about how we create density in our city, and one thing that we have not done is create a comprehensive plan that not only looks at where we put density, but how are we going to support it. We can't do that without thinking about the impact of the roads, the impact of our infrastructure above ground and below ground. Those are things that have to also be considered. And I believe we have low-hanging fruit. We've talked about it today. Properties that are AHA, the properties are the City of Atlanta properties. Looking at our major corridors that can absorb the traffic. And also while we're trying to work on transit, we need to make sure that we're not disrupting our whole state of being in the City of Atlanta in order to get density, but we need to be very thoughtful about where we put it, and we need to put it in places other than disrupting single-family neighborhoods. And if the neighborhoods that are single-family are supportive of some changes, there is a process called the Neighborhood Planning Unit. We have those thoughtful discussions and come out with a resolution.
We're coming up on the fifth and last question, a little bit longer, so listen carefully. Many of you said that developing city-owned land is a major step toward meeting affordable housing goals. I think everybody's spoken to that. However, it's also been said that solving affordable housing is a lot of 2% solutions. So in my mind, that's 50 strategies that we can't get to today. It's not just one. Here's the question. And this really is, based on, I think, the philosophy of the years at the Housing Forum as we have broadened that forum to talk about many issues. What is the responsibility of the city to coordinate efforts across public, private, and philanthropic sectors? How will you ensure there's a clear leadership and priority on affordable housing within the city? This is really about you as a leader and how you will be a collaborative leader, how you'll bring people to the table. I think we'll start with you, Mr. Dickens.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Bill, and your extended leadership since 1984 on this regional housing forum when you were just a young child. Anybody that puts an S on their chest for anything in this city is bound to fail or disappoint. You're gonna need everybody at the table. This is why I was really all in with the House ATL movement, why all those nonprofits, business leaders, government leaders, housing advocates and researchers all getting together to come up with these recommendations. Now, prior to that, I had already put a lot of those people in the same room when I created the inclusionary zoning policy. It was Invest Atlanta, it's Atlanta Housing Authority, it was the Law Department, Housing Advocates, Enterprise, Transformation Alliance, researchers. It is imperative that right now we get a mayor that has demonstrated the capacity to work together with all of these entities and agencies, to do it in earnest, to do it the long way, the hard way, to fight through state regulations and state policies that prohibit rent control and all these other things. We're going to have to be full throttle ahead on affordable housing, and that means utilizing relationships with the Atlanta Public Schools. I've sat on a task force to find housing that are school sites that can be for affordable housing. Working with MARTA, I've actually pushed MARTA to develop on their transit-oriented development sites across all of their MARTA stations. This is about collaboration, and a lot of these things may be 2% solutions. It's a toolkit, and every tool in the toolkit is necessary. So government, business, you have to get philanthropy involved, our schools, our institutions, et cetera, and our employers to work together.
Thank you. More.
Yes, the last thing we need, whether it's housing or any other issue, is another plan. What we need is execution. And what I'm going to do is have not just someone, but someone with staffing and support that can work to get the plans that have already been done and all the conversations that have been had with our great partners out there who have been working in this space of affordable housing and start executing those plans. I think that's what's important, is that we need to move forward with what we have done already and get those plans executed. Also, that person and their department, that person will be cabinet level, so to answer your earlier question, they will be responding to me as the mayor. And those people that are on that staff will be working hand in hand with our partners to make sure things get done. Whether it's the housing issue or any other issue, one thing that's so great about Atlanta is that we have the resources that we need to fix any issue that we have. We just need leadership that is willing to bring them to the table and then allow them to tell us what needs to happen. And we, as the city, yes, the city should be responsible for coordinating, whether it's internal issues with City Hall or external issues with City Hall, because the mayor's office, as well as the city, has a very good bully pulpit that can bring the resources and the people to the table. This is something for our people who live in this city, our residents, or our potential residents. So it is our duty and responsibility to coordinate and bring all of those people together. So as mayor, I will be making sure that we have a cabinet level position that responds to me with staff that can work with our partners who have been helping us in this space. Dust off all of these plans and get them executed.
Thank you very much. We're down to the area where I'm going to kind of ask yes and no questions. A number of these I already know the answer to because you've already spoken to them, but I'm going to go through the list. You've got your card here. Put up a yes or a no, and I'm just going to ask the question, and you answer. Everybody good with that? All right. Atlanta's living options are mostly large apartments, buildings, and single-family homes. There are too few duplex and quadruplex units that allow for middle market to form. The question, do you support changing the zoning ordinance to allow more density and missing middle housing? All right, we have a yes across the board. I think that's encouraging for the folks listening in. If elected mayor, would you adopt and build on the existing One Atlanta housing plan created in 2019, which aligned with House ATL's recommendations to meet housing affordability needs? This question, would you support the One Atlanta housing plan? All right, we have a yes across the board. Will affordable housing around transit and the Beltline be a priority for you? Several of you spoke to it in your answers. All right, that's a priority. The Atlanta City Council member Westmoreland, Dickens, Brown, and 7 others introduced an ordinance to City Council on Monday to propose a general budget allocation of 2%, phased in over 3 years for a new housing trust fund. Several of you sponsored this, so I think I know you probably support it, but let me ask, would you support this or other ideas for a dedicated source of revenue, something we've been looking for? All right, we have a no by Mr. Reed and a yes by the other candidate. Do you believe that the City of Atlanta should increase the number of permanent supportive housing units across the city? You all agree? Yes. If elected mayor, will you participate in the Atlanta Regional Commission's meeting, Metro Mayors Association, those kind of associations that have that conversation, you would participate in those? We have a yes across the board. I think that's encouraging for the region because we can't solve these things alone. Housing advocates are encouraging the execution of the second half of the $100 million bond. Are you committed to this? All right, excellent. Everybody agrees and supports that. The last one, 95% of renters have no legal representation when they are facing eviction. It's something we're right in the middle of. Landlords always do. Will you increase access to legal counsel as an effective way to increase stability for renters? All right. You all agree to that? And we thank you very much. All right, so it's time for closing remarks. I think you do this. You're going to do it 2 more times today on your closing remarks. I think what our viewers are looking for is why believe that you're going to act on any of the ideas you've shared today. Why should you be mayor and make housing a priority, which everyone has said they would?
Yes, most of you know that I've been a strong advocate on behalf of affordable housing in the city of Atlanta for the past 8 years, and that will not stop when I'm mayor of the city of Atlanta. I've worked with so many of these organizations and nonprofits and developers and landlords, et cetera, to be able to bring about policies and programs to get to this point where we have this House ATL and One Atlanta set of recommendations. Again, we just need to implement what we've already decided is what we need to do. I've worked hard on inclusionary zoning, and now I've even issued legislation to bring it lower in AMI. I've done hundreds of senior housing rehab units to make sure that seniors stay in place and fight displacement. We have done so many things in the city of Atlanta now with affordable housing that I want to do more. We've already done a $100 million bond to a $40 million bond. I want to do a $250 million bond and have $10 million in dedicated reserve, money coming in each year in our general fund.
Thank you, sir.
Your question is, why do people trust that we're going to do what we say we're going to do? And the issue is trust. And people who have followed city government know me. They know my record. They know I say what I mean and I do what I say. They also know that I've served with integrity for all of the years that I have been elected to serve in this office. So what you say and what you do does matter. They also know that I will be transparent with them about where we are as a city and what we plan to accomplish and how their money is being spent. That it's going to be done ethically and that I will continue to serve with integrity. But more importantly, I'm going to be held accountable, and I want people to hold me accountable for what I say that I'm going to do, what we have done in my administration, and most importantly, making sure that people get what I said I would do today and what I will say I will do as your next mayor. Thank you.
Let me thank each of you. Again, I know you have 3 of these today. You had one late last night. It really is a marathon. You know, what's clear, we all know each other, and I would say the 500-plus people that are tuning in know a lot about housing, know all of you. I think your comment about trust and can you actually do what you say, that's a key value. But each of you are leaders. One of you is going to be mayor. But each of you are leaders and are still going to be here in Atlanta. So we're going to need all of you in whatever capacity you can bring to the table. I think that's essential. We also have to always work from our assets, and we talked about many of the assets the city has and the assets that we can leverage. And we've got to collaborate. I know in the work of Housing ATL and the Housing Forum and all of us who have these conversations, we can't do it without each other. So I really do appreciate that you show up at the Housing Forum, that you are working hard on this issue. I would make note that 4 years ago, when we did this very forum at St. Luke's Episcopal Church, housing had not come up at any other forum. This year, housing has come up at every forum, no matter the issue. So crime is the #1 issue. It's related to housing and where people live and their availability. Public health and COVID is an issue. It involves housing. I mean, we can go right through the list. So I want to thank each of you for your leadership, for your courage to be a public servant today, and I look forward to working with you in the future.